take this opportunity to introduce myself as more attendees come in. My name is Glo Guevara. I am with Boulder. I lead impact and content. And we are celebrating the end of B Corp Month, which if you're a B Corp or you're part of the B Corp community, you have been celebrating or have seen a lot of campaigns around that. And what better way to close out the month, B Corp Month, than talking about how this has really improved. Being part of a B Corp has really improved, working as a company, and has been able to help companies marry both their commitment to the community as well as their commercial success. I think this is a question that a lot of B Corps always pose, and by the end of the webinar, I'm excited to hopefully be able to introduce the panel that's going to be able to shed some light on that. So without further ado, I am happy to pass this on to our moderator, the founder and chief executive owl at Knowledge Owl. Marybeth, over to you. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Glo. I am so happy to be here. I want to thank my friends Glo and Vero and my friends at Boulder for having me here. This feels sort of surreal because I am a new B. We just became B Corp certified in December. So our webinar topic for today, as Glo mentioned, is B is for benefit, how benefiting the world is good for business too. B Corps, as many of you might know, is recognized as one of the largest networks of the world of corporations and companies who are using business as a force for good. I think there are over 8,000 B Corps in the world, and that number is growing. But let me tell you, becoming a B Corp can be a long and painstaking and sometimes heartbreaking process. And I know this because we started our B Corp journey in May of 2020, and it took us 2.5 years to get there. Which was December of 2023, with one unsuccessful submission in the middle. The process to become a B Corp can take a long time, and it's hard. It's rigorous, and only 1 in 3 people who apply actually achieve certification, and that usually takes about 1 to 2 years. It requires commitment, time, and resources from the whole organization. And some people might wonder, why would you go through all this? So hopefully by the end of the day, we have a bunch of experts here to tell you how being a B Corp is good for your business too, and the bottom line. So with that, I would love to introduce each one of our 3 expert panelists who are leaders of B Corp organizations. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is not a long time, but I would love everybody to tell their story, specifically their B Corp story, so their personal and their business one. So who you are, how you got to be here today, and specifically the moment I would love to know is when you decided, like, hey, B Corp is important and I want this for my business. I can go forward first to sort of set the tone for this. So I founded Knowledge Owl, which is a software company. We help companies build knowledge-based websites. And very early on in my experience as the CEO, Chief Executive Owl at Knowledge Owl, I knew that profit was not the bottom line for me. I was not motivated by money. I was motivated by being a good business, by doing good in the world. But I didn't really have a framework that I was following or a word for this. I just knew I wanted to be different. Like, I didn't want to do things like other companies were doing it. So one day, I'm baking bread and I'm standing in the grocery store in front of a bunch of flour, and I have terrible analysis paralysis and I don't know which flour to get. And one flour box or like package catches my eye, and it's King Arthur flour. I'm like, that's a cool name. That's a cool logo. And I see on the package down near the bottom, it says employee owned, which that's cool. That's different. And I said, hey, it would be really cool if Knowledge Owl was employee owned one day. And then I see a little symbol, and turns out that was the B Corp symbol. And I said, what's this? So I researched and I said, someday it would be really cool if Knowledge Owl was a B Corp. Fast forward a few years, I find out that one of the companies, other software companies I really love and admire, Help Scout, is a B Corp too. And I often used to say, like, what would Help Scout do when I had questions about my business or my software company? And of course, they became a B Corp. And I was like, definitely something, someday we're going to become a B Corp. And then in 2020, I'm talking to somebody about wanting to be a better CEO. And they asked me what that would look like. And I said, well, for one, we'd be a B Corp. And they asked me what was stopping me. And that was May of 2020. And that's when I said, hey, maybe we'll do it now. So that's when we started our B Corp journey. And we became a B Corp in December of last year. And I met some new friends through that journey, including Glow and Vero from Boulder, which brings me here today. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to somebody else from Boulder, which is Mr. David. David, would you like to come on and give your 2-minute story?
Yeah, I'll do my best to keep it within 2 minutes. Thank you, Marybeth, and thank you, Chloe and Vera. It's really fun to be on this call or conversation or webinar, if we call it that. Yeah, so really quick, founded Boulder. We are a purpose-driven outsourcing company, proudly the largest B Corp certified outsourcing company in the world. And for us, our B Corp journey really oriented around when we incorporated as a business, we knew we wanted to be a B Corp, but we didn't have the means and really, like, frankly, the bandwidth or capacity to really go through the verification process. So we applied, to start in 2017, and then had to wait until 2019 until we had really the team around us to be able to be successful there. So it took us a few years to get there, and then during our application process, it actually took us about a year and a half to go through the entire process. But now we're proudly a B Corp certified company, but we're also incorporated as a public benefit corporation as well, which I think is an important distinction, but is also something that we're really proud to carry as well. Like Marybeth, I think for us, we've been touting that we're mission driven, purpose driven, and it's in our domain name that we're impact focused and impact minded. But the one thing that I really appreciated, Marybeth, what you said was, like, B Corp provides a framework for how you can actually measure and assess whether or not you're creating good. And in our process of not only going through the application, but then actually, inheriting the status and being introduced into the community, I think we've been really challenged with that idea of how are we measuring and defining and creating impact. And so really feel blessed to be a part of the community. We were in the Champions Retreat last year when we got to be in Philly and hear the Greystone Bakery present. And for me, one of the things that gets me so excited is these really innovative businesses that are taking different ways to create impact, from Greystone, which has a same day hiring practice where they don't go through an interview process, and they hire directly, and they build a learning and development curriculum to actually enable people to get jobs completely off the street. I think it's so beautiful. And so coming out of those retreats or coming out of these B Corp experiences, we're, at least for me, I'm flooded with new ways of wanting to do business and really kind of innovate around how we do good. So that's a little bit about us and a little bit about our B Corp story, Marybeth, and I'll pass it back to you.
I appreciate that. I have one follow-up question for you. When you founded Boulder, you knew you wanted to be a B Corp. How did you find out that B Corp was a thing? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it's and it's something I believe B Corp has done a really good job of creating brand awareness and loyalty on the B2C side. So it's in all the products I use. It's in my clothes. It's in the shampoos that I buy, and like everything there. It's been a really important focus for me as a consumer to choose to buy, B Corp certified companies. So yeah, I've known about it from a while as a consumer, but didn't really appreciate how complicated it would be, and the rigors around B2B as well. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, I was just curious. That's very cool. Sounds similar. Flour. It helps me decide what to buy because I have trouble making decisions. Yeah. So who do we want to hear from next? Let's bring up Maiya. I want to talk to Maiya.
Hello.
Hi. What about your 2-minute story?
Just finding my mute button. So Mangrove, I'm the CEO and founder of Mangrove Web. We are a website design and development company committed to creating transformational websites and brands for change-making organizations. And my B Corp journey actually started when I was working at the Impact Hub in San Francisco co-working space in 2013. I used to actually walk by the tiny B Lab office that was part of the co-working space, and one of my friends worked there. So I'd kind of heard bits and pieces about it, and there were a lot of really interesting purpose-driven folks in that space. And someone who was kind of like my mentor in the web development world at the time had become a B Corp, and really like inspired me to get into it. And I had studied international development and, you know, knew I wanted to do something progressive in the world, but sort of made a roundabout way to becoming a website developer. I just ended up teaching myself how to code and, you know, playing around with the website of the nonprofit I worked with, getting in a bit over my head, doing a little bit of freelance work and just figuring out as I went along. And so what I discovered is that I could actually use these design and technical skills to support change makers. And that felt like a lot more, like a much more direct impact than a lot of other avenues that I was thinking about when I was kind of coming out of college. So I started Mangrove. Originally, it was me freelancing, and then built it up over time. But we became a certified B Corp in 2016. At the time, I was a sole proprietor with kind of a small team of subcontractors. And so I had the benefit of being able to go through the process and really shape Mangrove as we went through it. But for me, it just felt like it was solidifying something we were already doing, something we already believed in and cared about. And it just created similar to what you said, it created this infrastructure for what I felt like was already at the core. And the more I learned about it, it just kind of fit the bill in terms of how we wanted to establish and grow the company.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. I love your story. Last but not least, also, isn't this sort of fun that you can't see the people until they come up? It's like a mystery. We have one more mystery guest. Tom, 2 minutes to you, sir.
Thank you, Marybeth. Thank you, Team Boulder. And as you can probably tell from my ridiculous accent, I'm representing the UK this evening or this morning, whatever it is. And I'm really, really thrilled to tell my story. So I am the founder and chief ecosystem officer of Greenheart. We are a social and environmental impact consultancy. We're probably best known for taking companies through the B Corp process. That's what we've done since day one, and we've done most of, but we do all the other good stuff like sustainability, net zero, strategy, all of that kind of thing. And really our B Corp journey started before Greenheart really existed, certainly before I knew what it was going to do. It was when, after 7 miserable years as a lawyer and then 3 equally miserable years running a food business, I read about B Corp in the trade press. This was 2015 when B Corp had literally just arrived in the UK. And I just thought, wow, that is what I believe business should be all about. And I've never heard it summarized so well. So this is something I've got to get involved in. Got straight onto the training the B Leader training to help companies through it. Established Greenheart and put Greenheart through certification in 2017. So that's when we became a B Corp. Now, my first bit of advice is we did it similar to Maiya when it was just me, and I did it with a bottle of wine at night on the kitchen table. That is absolutely not the way to go through your BIA. Just saying. But similar to Maiya as well, as we grew, as we started taking on employees, particularly, it formed the blueprint for the sort of business that I wanted to run. And I think echoing something I think Marybeth said, or maybe David, I just wanted to do things differently. I wanted to take the paradigm of business that I was used to, flip it on its head, and here was the model. I bought into it. I still buy into it. I love it, and it has served us so well. So yeah, I hope that's even sub 2 minute, but a good succinct intro to the story.
I liked it. It was very colorful too. I think it's really interesting that both of you did it as sole proprietors when you were very small. I'm very similar. I have a co-founder, so we're the only 2 employees, but we work with, and we have about 10 total people, but they are all contractors on our team. So I think that simplifies the process a little bit when you are actually coming in. How big, David, was Boulder when you actually went through the process?
That's a good question. I think around 800 team members globally at that time. So it was complex, and
I'm sure that adds complexity.
Yeah, and I think the additional complexity was we had multiple, our corporate governance structure had subsidiaries, and because of that, it created an additional level of complexity in the assessment process. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think one of the things that stopped me early on, like I found out about B Corp and I said, we'll do that later. And I just felt like we were too small. And then turns out there's a lot of B Corps that are even just sole proprietors. So like it's never too early and you're never too small to be a B Corp. And I love that. That's something I did not know. So there's a learning from that. I would love to transition into talking a little bit about the certification process. Like I said, it can be long, it can be painstaking. What were some struggles and complexities some of you faced as you went through your journey? David, I might go back to you since you mentioned that you started in 2017 and you mentioned some specific things around maybe not having the team in place to actually make it through the certification process. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks. I think when, in 2017, as we applied, it was asking questions around like, what are your, workforce practices or your policies around XYZ? Do you have an approach for sourcing vendors that have an impact focus or what is your vendor sourcing strategy? And at that time, we were just starting up, and so it was a lot of these questions that I felt were really overwhelming for us and to really think about. And while we wanted to really be a part of this ecosystem, it just wasn't really the main focus for us. Like we really wanted to continue focusing on growth. And so 2 years later, once we had the infrastructure, the team members that we could have that were really focused on this, it made a lot more sense for us to go through the process. And I think in 2019 through 21, we really made it a priority. And I think that's my one piece when I think about the certification process in general, is it needs to be, like one of the pieces from a CEO or the founder, the entrepreneur, or the executive team has to really be bought into it. And it needs to be a big OKR for the entire company in order for it really to move forward. I think a lot of groups that I talk to, it's typically a marketing goal. And I don't think at that level, it's really reaching the right stakeholders in the business. And so that's just a tangent that I thought about around the certification process, was that we really made it a priority. And I think it really helped us go through the process and the assessment well. So thank you.
Very cool. Did you end up having a dedicated like team or person that handled the process the last time?
Yeah. So Glow, she really had the opportunity to go through and help us with the assessment process. And now she's helping us with our recertification process. And so, yeah, we created an impact department that leads all of our initiatives and makes sure that we have our policies and procedures and everything is, on the up and up when it needs to be. So absolutely.
That is super cool. An impact department. How big is it?
Glow is going to slap me because I'm going to say a number that might not be completely accurate.
Glow, you can come on and say it.
I think it's about 4 team members, and we have one per each jurisdiction that represents us. So one in Mexico, one in South Africa, and the Philippines as well, and then obviously Glow. So.
That's like some B Corp goals there, is having a team, an impact team. Very cool.
Yeah.
I will go to Tom next with this question. I know you did it with a bottle of wine. Were there some challenges while you were going through the process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially the further down the bottle of wine I got. But I think at that level, the challenge is every question in the BIA is worth like 3 points. Okay, so when it's much easier for it to go wrong. But on the flip side, it's much easier for you to fix it, especially when you're in true startup mode. It's like, you need a policy on this. Brilliant. 5 minutes later, you've got one. I would say the challenges have definitely escalated as we've scaled. We've been through, as I'm sure Maiya and David have 2 recertification cycles now since our initial certification, and the challenges that we've met are, and I'm obviously very keen to talk to you from our perspective, but obviously we're working with clients every day on their certification challenges. They are often the same. Access to data, finding the numbers that B Lab want you to report to them, but also the operational minutiae of some of the changes that you want to put in place and getting everyone both aligned with them, but actually getting them done. Our last recertification, where we increased our score pretty substantially, our last recertification, I mean, this is, I should say, also one of the hazards of having 9 B leaders in your team is that you're going to be pushed pretty hard to sort of achieve. But there was a lot that was being delegated around the business the whole time in terms of activity. So I think that access to data, the efficiency of being able to draw it, and the ability to focus on some pretty minute changes, those were big challenges throughout.
And Maiya, same thing.
Yeah, so one of the challenges is like we're a 16-person team now, and we're not really large enough that we have a dedicated beekeeper. One of our managing partners and myself usually manage most of our recertification, and I did our original certification. And it's kind of like Tom said, it's like you're steering a large ship. Like it's really an investment in the business in the long term, because a lot of these things, some of these things you can create a policy quickly, especially if you're quite a small organization at the time. But other things really take time. And so you kind of flag it for, yes, we're going to start doing that, and we might be done with it in 6 months, or we need to move all of our banking because we get credit for being at a credit union or a B Corp bank. And, I'm going to start that process. And there's obviously a lot of nuances of that. And so, but one of I think also, like Tom said, with the data, there are a couple of things. Like we have a couple global team members in different countries. And one of the questions is about living wages and benchmarking wages in a number of, family wages and living wages for, single household with children, all, specific indicators, which aren't that easy to find for some of the countries that our team members are in. And at this moment, as far as I know, Tom, you might know differently, there weren't direct resources for some of the information that we needed. And so it was hard to find a single point of truth. And I think B-Lab is trying to mitigate those instances, but they're pulled in a lot of different directions. And so I was trying to be really accurate and clear, but I was also doing a lot of my own research about what these benchmarks are and what we can compare against. And I'm hopeful that will continue to get better over time. And especially in the world of remote working, which we've been doing for a long time, and the world of having a global team, it's kind of like everyone's all kind of catching up to some of the aspects of that.
Yeah, it is complicated as a remote global. Sometimes there's just not clear definitions of things yet, employees, especially once you start crossing borders, which I think most of us are familiar with. Yeah. But y'all made it. And I'm curious, now that you are a B Corp, you spent all of this time, money, and effort to become a B Corp and to recertify as a B Corp. What impact has it had on loyalty from both your staff and your customers? Tom, I'll go to you first, since your customers are interestingly B Corps, right? Generally?
A lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them. And I think, I'll start there, because literally the day we certified, we won our first client, our first B Corp client, because we were a B Corp, which I'm not sure is very, common occurrence, but it was just nice to be able to say that is manifested straight away. I think the kind of the loyalty that we get from both clients and employees, and I would probably actually say employers and then clients in that order, employees and then clients in that order, is not so much because we're certified, but I think it's because of the practices that we have in place in order to be a B Corp. I think it makes us a better company. Of course it does, and therefore we are better to deal with. And I think given the priorities of people in the workforce now, particularly the younger people in the workforce now, they align so closely with B Corp values that it means we have such an incredibly passionate and aligned and dedicated team behind us. And so for me, the benefits, and I say this coming out of quite a difficult economic year and a challenging year for us as a business, the team around us have doubled down. They haven't sort of said, where is the grass greener? They've said, look, we are behind you. We are on this journey with you. We are so impassioned by this mission. We're going to crack this. So I would say, is it because we are certified? Don't know. Is it because we are a B Corp style business? Absolutely 100%.
I resonate with that a lot. As I mentioned earlier, we started our journey in 2020 and did not get certified until 2023, just 3 months ago. But we were very public about the fact that we wanted to be a B Corp. We blogged about it. We talked about it when we hired. That's like something we talked about, that we wanted to be a B Corp. And we had customers who would tell us that that's really cool that you wanted, like they were signing up and telling us that they were inspired that we were even trying to be a B Corp, and that people would put that into our, our staff feedback surveys. They were like, I really appreciate that. And I can tell you, I was really depressed when we didn't get certified, and I sort of just stepped away from it. And it was the team that said, hey, we want to finish it. And it was the team that did our certification. The second time, it was me the first time trying to do it. And then it was the team. They're like, we want to do this. And they're the ones that brought us through the finish line. So it's been really interesting to see the impact it had even before we were certified on my company. David, how about you? You were giving some thumbs up there.
Yeah, no, I totally resonate. And I think just to, without, mansplaining or repeating what Tom so eloquently said, I think the summation of my experience here and our experience is a really good quote by Seth Godin, and a kind of a mantra. People like us do things like this. And for us, we're waving that flag like, hey, we're mission oriented, we're purpose driven. And it's been really inspiring to win clients and win opportunities with companies who are also like-minded. But then also on the employee side, like there's some incredible team members that we've been able to onboard who seeked us out because of our B Corp orientation. And for me, that creates raving fans and also an alignment with purpose. And so, yeah, people like us do things like this. I'm gonna leave it there.
It's a good quote. I hadn't heard it before. I'm into it.
Yeah.
Maiya, I do want to give you a chance to answer like this question too, if you have something to add. But talking about B Corp as a differentiator, like we're saying, like people are seeking out B Corp, you sort of pivoted your business model for your agency and your web design agency to cater towards businesses for good. And you've like pretty cool clients, it looks like, from looking at your website. Do you think like your status as a B Corp got you some of those clients?
Yes, and I wouldn't say we pivoted. We always worked for it. In the early days, it was me and the tiny nonprofit that my uncle knew, and then it evolved over time. And now we're working with a lot of large purpose-driven organizations, foundations, nonprofits, B Corps, et cetera. And it's interesting, like what Tom was saying about, there's the certification and there's, kind of the seal itself, and then there's the way of doing things. And I think they come into play equally in terms of the marketing and the acquisition of, or, finding and connecting to clients as well, because there's a handful of, there's a cohort of clients who automatically know what B Corp is all about, like especially being in California in the Bay Area, there's this contingent of purpose-driven leaders who are all about it. And then there's also quite a few clients we talk to who don't really know about it, but it actually gives us the opportunity to explain in a succinct way, like what we stand for. And that itself resonates, even if someone doesn't know like what B Corp is specifically. And so I think it's definitely built trust with clients. It's connected us to people. We've gotten more traction in terms of creating partnerships with other B Corps. We actually ended up acquiring a partner B Corp about a year ago, and now we have a Canadian entity established. But that was, aside from the acquisition, like that was this amazing partnership of really, really like-minded teams who really shared resources and grew alongside each other in a really supportive way. And so, the reason we joined forces is because we had so much values alignment, and we knew that partly because like we were following the same set of principles really wholeheartedly. And so, I think you can definitely use it to your advantage, especially if it's really authentic. If it's not just a marketing tool and you're talking about like what you do, what you care about, like the presentation we just did was about digital accessibility, and we were talking about how that's part of inclusion and DEI practices, and like those things are woven into so much of what we do. And the B Corp certification helps to continue to figure out all these ways in which you can deepen that. And then you know, as long as you're living that out in the world, like, yes, you can absolutely use it to your advantage. And hopefully because you're really like living it and just sharing that in a really clear way by saying like, we have, you know, this B and this is what it means. So
I think I keep seeing like now in my head when I see the B Corp logo, I'm like looking at it as like a little flag. Like we're just like waving a little B Corp flag, you know, just showing people we're there. But one of the sort of like a theme in a lot of stories I hear from other people of B Corps is that idea is like it was always in our DNA. This is just like stamp of approval. Like this is like proof that like this is something that we always were. So like not like a pivot. It's more like just here's the stamp of approval.
yeah,
It just
one of
makes it
my
easier to communicate.
yeah, one of my early mentors was like, these are kind of the guardrails that are in place that allow us to like grow and move in this direction. And, you know, Tom and I, having done this in the really early days of our business, like those were just set and we were like, okay, continue going this direction, but now we have some structure and guidance around it.
It's good to have guardrails. I appreciate structure immensely. Other folks, how is becoming the B Corp, getting the stamp of approval opened up opportunities for you? Waving your flag.
I'll jump in here a little bit. Like I mentioned, I think B Corp is incredibly helpful from a consumer's perspective. Like I choose to buy products because they're B Corps, because you know I like to work with or you know use and consume like purpose-driven pieces of things. But I have a little bit of maybe a pessimistic viewpoint here in the B2B world. And yes, there is like in the BIA, there is that supplier question around how are you choosing your vendors and partners. But especially in the area of the world that we work in and the industry sectors that we're in, you know, being in the global outsourcing world, being a B Corp is not a buying decision. It's not why clients choose Boulder, and it really it's price and quality that are like at the forefront of decision making. And so while I wish and aspire for one day ethical purchasing and procurement and large partnerships being one of the biggest mandates and hopefully something that shifts. I don't know how or I don't know if being a B Corp has been really helpful as far as our ability to attract a magnet of other B2B like-minded companies. It has a little, but it's not the main driver for us. And from a value perspective, what we saw was, Maiya, you were kind of talking about it, where the living wage component, or not necessarily understanding how to define living wage in these markets. Being a B Corp introduced us to the UN Global Compact, which introduced us to thought leaders, to professors, individuals who are deeply passionate about living wage in developing economies where there is no MIT or Oxford who's leading the living wage charge. And so we actually got to partner in creating and defining what it means to have a living wage in the Philippines. And that to me is where the value is really there. It's so for me, what I'm trying to say is it wasn't necessarily about being able to acquire new clients, but being able to be a part of driving this change in these environments is really what we're seeing as far as the value proposition, the willingness to engage, et cetera. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I think it's really, Maiya.
Oh, I was just gonna quickly add that like part of the benefit for us, like I was saying, is these partnerships and collaborations, but there's so much synergy within the B Corp world where when you just said that, David, I'm like, okay, great. I need to hit you up about living wage stats in a couple of countries that we are having a hard time with. And there's so much resource sharing in service of moving forward. That's been a huge benefit for us.
Yeah, I think the community, this is something I didn't expect or know. And I just feel like now after becoming a B Corp, and turns out you could have been part of the community before becoming a B Corp. I did not know that. But suddenly it seems like all of these doors are open, right? These doors you just didn't know were open. I went to a meeting yesterday. I saw Maiya there for a hot second. It was a group called We the Change, and it's a group of women CEOs of B Corps and purpose-driven orgs that I didn't know existed. And I think just seeing all of these doors opening is just pretty impressive. Tom, any other insights on opportunities for you?
Yeah, and well, there's various bits I'm itching to leap on, and I think just following that point, I would echo absolutely. It's the inspiration, it's the innovation, it's the communication, it's the collaboration that comes with this community. It is unlike any business community I've ever known in my career. Just because I could pick up the phone to any of these guys, any of you guys I know, I could pick up the phone to the CEO of a huge B Corp, and I know I'd get some airtime because that's the way it works. And yeah, I think Maiya, the point you make about the partnerships that start from a point of shared values at the start, there's real power in that. Like we get stuff done, okay, in business through partnerships like that. And I think just picking up on David's point about being a certified B Corp as a supplier, obviously we're in B2B. Is it a driver for purchase? Probably not in its own right. I mean, not least because most of our competitors are also B Corps, so you can take your pick of one B Corp or another B Corp. But I keep coming back to this point about it driving the type of business we are. In that we have better governance because we're a B Corp. It's driving our maturity because we're a B Corp. And that I think is part, it's not all of, but it is definitely a big part of what people are buying. So the opportunities are endless, and ultimately what you make of them.
That's a good segue, Tom. It's one of the things I wanted to talk about, since some of you have been B Corp certified for quite a few years now, is how B Corp and its goals and its standards have contributed to the long-term success of your businesses.
Do you want to stick with me? I'm very happy to pick that
Please
straight up.
Please do.
I mean, I think it has really helped us define our value proposition over the years. We've been very impact focused since day one. B Corp gives us the framework, particularly when you're looking at things like the impact business models, which is part of the BIA process. It gives you a very clear way in which to define and measure the impact of the things that your business is in existence to do. So we've aligned ourselves with various IBMs since day dot, which has definitely, it's just helped give us the clarity. I think, on the one hand, and appreciating everyone on this panel as a founder, it's a huge privilege to be a founder of a business, massive privilege, not least because you can say, I want to do things differently. And if you're lucky enough to find people who'll follow you on that journey, as we all have been, then, it really is just the privilege, certainly of my life. But it does give you those guardrails. It gives you that definition of here's what we want to achieve, here's how we should achieve it. And therefore, it's contributed hugely to our value proposition.
So I know the past couple of years have been rough for a lot of businesses. I don't know if it's been rough for any of y'all too. What about the resilience? Like, how do you think B Corp helps you weather the storms? Because there will always be storms in business.
Yeah, I have an example there. I think when it was really our approach to going through the pandemic that I think was top of mind for me when I heard the word resilience. This was just after our B Corp certification in that process. And really for us, we really leaned into focusing on our team members and making sure that we did right by them through the pandemic as much as we could. And so I think what I'm trying to say here is that like B Corp, it really, the frameworks in the BIA, it really aligned as far as the long-term goals that we had and making sure that we had we executed in line with those goals. And so as we were going through COVID and moved from everybody being in an office to everybody working from home and going through that process, it really helped support us in that change. And the other piece that I really wanted to talk about around resilience was that resilience, but also just incorporating B Corp's goals, was the idea of really making sure that our economic engine or our business's goal was really tied to our impact engine as well, and making sure that those two were correlated and working in partnership and in lockstep. And so without B Corp really pushing that question in the BIA and having us rethink it, impact engine would have been separated to this day with our economic engine. And so now that we've been able to mirror those and combine them, it really allowed us to really build more resilience in our organization, because we know that we're protecting and preserving our team members, and they're creating a little bit more longevity in our way of working. So yeah, those are my pieces there, Marybeth.
It's hard. It's always been a struggle for me to like think about the money side of the business, and I think the going through the BIA and going through the process made me think like the money is really important, because we can't do good if we don't have money, right? And it needs to be a holistic thing and not this sort of separate thing you do.
Yep.
Maiya.
I think one of my advisors would say, like an impact of zero is still zero. So whether or not you have good intentions, if you don't have a business, you're not going to be able to create that impact. So exactly, yeah, just double clicking on what you said, Marybeth. Sorry, Maiya.
Oh, you're good. I love the quotes. I was just curious to go back to Maiya to see where she was at.
Yeah, I can make this one short. I mean, for us, it's really similar. It's that we put a lot of time and energy into the way we support our workforce and the way we care for our team, and they really like show up for us because they know we're doing everything we can to build a business that that supports their lifestyle, their freedom, their well-being. And the last year, especially for us, was very challenging, and having that trust and transparency in place with our team has been really, really important, just in terms of the way they show up and work hard when we really need everyone to go full steam ahead, knowing that like when there's a chance to back off a little bit, like we will do that and kind of listen to what everybody needs. And so everyone really like ebbs and flows in a way that's supportive of one another. And I think part of that is fostered by the like foundational aspect of like the worker well-being piece for us. So
I think it goes back to that fostering the like loyalty amongst folks, so that when tough times do show up, the people have your back and they're going to ride out the storm with you. So they believe in the mission.
I would say that extends. So I spoke a little earlier about exactly as you've just said, Maiya, the kind of the loyalty and the alignment that comes from the team with this, and definitely that's contributed massively to our resilience in a tough year last year. But I'd say it does extend beyond just the kind of workforce, and I think we saw this in COVID. I think because of the emphasis that B Corps have on stakeholder interdependence, we've seen the relationships, that kind of trust and loyalty, extend into the client relationships, into supplier relationships, into community relationships, and it's a different way of looking at the role of your business in its community. Like we have a mutual value exchange. It is not just you pay us and we do work, and then if things go pear-shaped, we're all out of here. It is we need each other, we trust each other, we're going to offer to support each other in a very different way, especially when you're trading with other B Corps, I found.
That's a good segue. You're very good at segues, Tom. Into what do you think, and this is probably a really good question for you, how do you see the role of B Corps evolving over the next few years, 5, 10?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately, I'm careful how I say this, but ultimately we need the concept of B Corp to cease to exist eventually, right? Because we just need every business to be operating to these values. And so there's a great tension in the community at the moment, and I see it the whole time. Often happens with nascent movements that have reached a point of maturity where it splits between the purists who want to keep it small and clubby and niche and innovative, and then those who just want to see it adopted by the mainstream. And that's a real tension at the moment that we're seeing around the market. But my view is really very clear that every business should be operating like this, because the world will therefore be a better place. So the job of B Corp is to get us to that point, to keep us true to keep the standards as high as they need to be, to keep us true to those standards, and then eventually make it self-redundant because we are all working to those rules.
I like your vision.
Yeah. Tom, a way I used to say that was like, we want to move away from being the exception to, B Corp and the way of living and the purpose-minded organizations being the expectation. And so that's our aspiration, is that, being the first one to pioneer a living wage in the Philippines, I'm so excited for other outsourcing companies and others, to champion this as well, because then a rising tide lifts all boats, and we're all, creating a much more larger material impact that way. And then Marybeth, one last point I had was, I get really curious about how B Corp can help companies define and measure the negative impact that they're creating. There's a lot of unintended consequences in doing business that I think I spent a lot of time not really thinking about. And I remember I was meeting with Jorge, and I was telling him a little bit about our business, and I was talking to him about the fact that a large number of our workforce works at night, and he's like, "Oh, I'm really curious about what the unintended consequences of that action are." And so my point is, like, I get really curious about how B Corp can help companies like us measure where are we actually creating more harm than good. And I think, it'll be really interesting if we can explore that.
Any
Yeah.
other thoughts, Maiya?
One thing that's been coming up for me a lot, and I had a few discussions at this last retreat, is sort of the place of the small businesses as the B Corp movement grows. And so when Mangrove was founded, we were one of 2,000 businesses globally, and now I think it's around 8,000. It's hard to keep track, which is awesome. And and in that growth, it's clearly shifting. There's a whole set of new standards that are coming out that are going to change the way that businesses certify, and just change some of the parameters of how the points are accumulated and everything. And there's been a lot more like larger multinational B Corps that have been onboarded in the last couple of years. And small businesses at the same time many have had a couple hard years with the economy being unstable and unpredictable. And so I'm curious of like how small businesses will continue to be supported within the movement and what their place is, because without them, like, the bottom falls out of the movement. But B Lab also needs to put focus on these larger corporations to certify and like really put a stake in their ground and move push the movement forward with like their strength. And I'm hopeful that like the little guys aren't left in the dust. And I think that's a really big question right now. Tom, I'm curious if anything is coming up for you, having, being in amongst many different B Corps in your work.
I think it's a really great point, and I agree with absolutely everything you're saying. I think that the inspiration and the innovation comes from the small guys, for sure. And I think you see, and when I say small, I use that word advisedly. David, you're not, your builder is not in that bracket. You are absolutely the innovator. But let's say the difference between those around this table and the multinationals is we need to be leading the charge on what it means to be a B Corp. We need to be kind of constantly pushing, and as I said earlier, making sure that B Lab keeps up its role to elevate the standards, to keep us to account on it. Absolutely. And we are there, I think, as you have seen over the years from the likes of Unilever acquiring pockets of B Corps around the place because they want this vibe infiltrated into their portfolio, into their wider business. We have a role to do that because we can innovate faster and differently, and in a way that they just can't, unless somebody like us is doing it for us. I think the interesting point about the inherent resilience of small businesses at times of real economic challenge is a fascinating one to unpick. And I would love eventually to see a way in which small B Corps with a valid underlying business model, who deserve to do well and succeed and keep that innovation pipeline going, can be in some way supported by the movement or by the larger entities. Because we're needed. Everyone's needed. Everyone is needed. We've just got to be on the same page, pulling in the same direction.
Maiya, it was beautiful, because this is our time for y'all to ask questions to each other. So you just ask questions to Tom and we're here. So I did want to give some time. I know we've covered a lot of ground. So if any of you have questions for me or for the rest of you, if anybody here listening has questions, I'm watching the chat too, so I'll be sure to ask. And we already have one, so you guys get off the hook for a second. So how has being a B Corp come up in your conversations with current clients or prospects? And does it shape or influence these conversations?
I usually like interject it kind of as part of the introduction, and sometimes folks ask more, and sometimes they're like, oh yeah, we know what that is, great. And it's like, we're like, we see you, we know, we're like talking about the same thing. And so, and it's, it's part of our proposal. There's a page in our presentation deck and you can link out. And so I would say more often than not, we mention it briefly and people know what it means, or we just lay the foundation, simply. And then some clients have actually come back to us, like, after we've worked with them and said, like, now we're interested in becoming a B Corp. Can you share your process? So we kind of just fit it in there as part of like the way we introduce ourselves.
I love that. Yeah, it feels really flattering when companies come to us and ask us, hey, can you help us advise us on where to go and how to become a B Corp? It's like, it gives us a really warm, fuzzy feel as well. I'll just jump in since I'm talking. I think the biggest learning for us was we were talking about what being a B Corp means for Boulder to our clients, and we weren't necessarily, and we're working on this actively right now, of translating what it means in being a B Corp at Boulder, but for our clients. Like, what's the value for our clients? What do they get? And what's the benefit of them working with a B Corp? And so how do we tie all of the different value props that we know about what it means for our team members and being in this community with our client base? And so that's the work that we're taking on. And it's been really helpful just to really acknowledge that we haven't been like speaking in the language of what being a B Corp means to our client base. So we're shifting our positioning a little bit and more talking about how, because we're a B Corp and because we focus on employee wellness, we have better retention. And because our team members are staying longer, they're able to deliver more work or more higher quality work and know your client, your systems better, et cetera, which improves quality metrics and KPIs like that. And so my point is we're really trying to draw the line between being a B Corp and what it means and how it differentiates us with our clients. And so, yeah.
It's really interesting that you've asked that question, because I'm reflecting on it thinking, I'm not sure I know the answer. We've just spent 3 months developing our marketing strategy and our value prop, and I can't now think of a single place within it where it says you must talk about the fact we're a B Corp. So I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a massive oversight or maybe it's just a reflection. I think my answer is this. When I was working in the food sector, I was running organic food businesses. And we had this debate a lot about what are we selling ourselves on? Are we selling ourselves on the fact we're organic or that we're selling a good product? And time again, we came back to the conclusion is that people want to buy an epically good quality product. The fact that it's organic should just be a given. And I think that is my answer on the hoof slightly, but I think this is probably why we've got to where we've got to. We sell an epically high quality product. The fact that we're a B Corp should just be a stamp of like necessity of approval. Of course they're a B Corp. Of course they're a B Corp. Well, who wouldn't be?
Yeah, I just thought back and I was like, I don't think I've ever brought it up. Other people have brought it up to me, which is flattering when they do bring it up. I'm like, oh, they saw that and it meant something to them, but I don't think I've ever used it to like lead with, because again, I think people are coming because they're buying software. They're not going out there being like, who can I purchase B Corp from? It's a B Corp. But I do think it helps, for people who are like-minded and to attract like-minded, value-aligned folks that say like, oh, I like these people. Maybe I'll try this person out first because of the value alignment. But I've never led with it. But that would be an interesting experiment.
Should be very clear. We don't hide it. We don't hide it.
Yes,
it's very much
it's all over our website.
Splattered everywhere, but
yeah,
in the conversation.
Yeah, I just never mentioned it in the actual direct conversations. We are getting close to time. So if you do have any burning questions for each other, feel free to ask them. But I do have one for final thoughts. I thought it would be helpful because I'm assuming and I'm guessing, well, we don't want to make assumptions, but I know some of these people that are coming here today are people who are interested in being a B Corp. They might be aspiring B Corps. They might be just finding out what B Corps are. What would be your advice for companies who are thinking about becoming a B Corp? Closing thoughts.
I can jump in on that. So when we started becoming a B Corp, I was feeling similar to you, Marybeth, of feeling overwhelmed, not sure if we could do it, not sure if it was the right time, this and that. And so what this person said to me at the time was like, just sign into the BIA, create a profile, just start doing it. And you don't have to submit it, you can save it. It's but then at least you know what's there. And so I did that, and he said, just go through and liberally mark off like what's true, what maybe could be true with a little bit of effort, and then like just see where you land. And I think that's such a good way for anyone to start, no matter where you are, because you have to know like what the things are, and whether or not you get certified today, in 2 years, never. There's a lot of information in there that's helpful to understand like how to run a better business. And so you might take things away from it and employ them and not actually do the full certification, or you might see this path forward where like in however much time, like you'll get there. So just get in there, just do it. It's like the Google BIA or B Corp impact assessment, and just start chipping away at it. Like you don't have to submit it, just play with it.
It's free. You can just go on that website right now and just start your impact assessment and go through and just give yourself points, and you can see where your score is, and you can see how close you are to 80, which is what you need to be a B Corp.
Yeah, and you
other advice
probably will be at like 30 or 40, and that's totally normal.
That's fine.
And then you just keep working.
David, advice, aspiring B Corps.
Yeah, I think especially I'm going to talk to those who are a little bit maybe like later stage, maybe, you know, a little round of funding, 20 to 30 team members. Work with people like Tom. Like if there's people out there that can help you go through this process. I wish we did it. It would have really helped us understand what we were getting into and really build the plan and incorporate it into our strategy. You know, I think we kind of dove in head first, and perhaps there was a better way of being guided through the process and, you know, learning from others who've already done it. And then there's lots of people out there that I've talked to who do that. And so I would just really suggest at least having a conversation with them to understanding, what it is, how it works, and, you know, how you can go through it. So that's my piece.
I like it. Good plug. Tom, advice.
I mean, how can I follow that? That was going to be my advice, obviously, but no, I would give, sorry, I would give the advice that was given to me when I was making this decision by the wonderful Hermione Taylor at Do Nation, who is the most name-checked person in the history of B Corp, or a Green Heart anyway. To paraphrase Maiya, she said, just do it. Tom, there is no good reason not to. You'll always find good reasons not to. Just get on with it.
I love it. Just do it. Go for it. I'm going to bring Glow back up here to wrap up, but I'm going to do a speed round because we do have some questions from the audience. One, do you think your B Corp status, to some extent, is a way for your clients to be influenced on becoming one? Do you have an example of a client who became a B Corp that was inspired by you?
Yep.
I see nods. David's had one. It's happened.
Yeah, we've had two. It's been great.
That's amazing. Maiya, I think you mentioned this too.
Yeah, I was just saying, even the other day, a client reached out and said, hey, we're thinking about becoming a B Corp. We also often talk to clients who are like early in the process and either are a public benefit corporation, which we are as well. It is a requirement if it's available in your state. So yes, this has definitely happened. And we've always just tried to really liberally share information if people are interested in like what it is and whether they're a client or a partner or, you know, whoever else in our realm. Another like small piece of advice is you can also look into becoming a public benefit corporation. You have to do it if you're a certified B Corp, if it's available in your state, but often it's a lot less work and it's a good way to get started and kind of get your foot in there. So
last speed question. What strategies have you used to align employee values with your purpose-driven mission? That's a tough one for speed. Strategies to align employees' values.
I think that's another webinar. That's like
that's a good one. Part 2. Like, we'll be back. We'll be back next month. Flo's organizing it.
Yes. Which brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much to all our panelists. For everyone who's watching, please follow Knowledge Owl, Mangrove, Web, Green Heart, and of course, Boulder. We'll be sharing this webinar for those who couldn't make it, recording of it to everyone. But yeah, thank you so much, Maiya, Marybeth, Tom, and David for taking the time to educate all of us. And we hope to see you in the next webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Really good to see you.